Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about accessibility for the internet. So, many of us, I would say a majority of us, use the internet. We go on web pages, we click on links, we type things into boxes, we use it without ever even thinking about it, right? The internet, up until recently, has really, and even recently, has really only served those of us that are, um, non-seeing impaired. We, don't have disabilities, and it really has segmented a large portion of the population that is seeing impaired or has a visual impairment, that is disabled, that needs to use a special keyboard or selector, not a mouse, things like that. And we as developers need to always have the entire population in our mind, especially as the internet becomes this thing that is critical for day-to-day life. Many of us can't get through the day without going on the internet, and that not just in a like got to check Instagram type of thing, but like I got to fill out a job application, or I've got to fill out a form for this government service, or I need to access something from my bank. Things like that are things that we need to use every day. And if we don't have everyone in mind when we build our sites, then we're segmenting a large portion of the population. It's said about 2.3% of the US population has a visual impairment. 2.3% is about 7.5 to 8 million people in America. That's America alone. That's not considering worldwide. Okay. And so if we don't make our sites accessible to everyone, then we are thereby saying that those 8 million people don't get to use our site. And so it's a difficult thing. It's a thing that companies spend a lot of money on, or should. But we need to make sure that we make things accessible for everyone. The internet is a democracy. We need to make sure that everyone can use it. So let's talk about a couple of little things real quick about how to make our sites friendlier for those with visual impairments. And then we can talk about screen readers too. When we talk about media queries, we can talk about the different queries. Voice or reader is one of them. But let's jump in here and let's talk about this. Most of the time, most of us, when we get a new computer or we download Chrome or Firefox or something, we just use what we got right out the box, right? Like I said in the last video, our baseline font size is about 16 pixels, and it's different for every browser and different for every computer. But if we come and we open up our settings in Chrome, we can see font size is medium. And it's not going to say 16 pixels. It's just going to say medium. Okay. If you open that up, you can change that font size. This is the standard font size on your computer. Let's go very large for someone that has visual impairment. They can't read very small, fine text. They want it to be very large, just as their standard. When we come in here and we see that let's go set this font size 10. We see that we don't have any difference if we set our font size to 10 pixels, right? So no matter what we do, it's still going to be 10 pixels, right? So what we can do in this case is we can set our font size to be relative to the size of the user's font. And we can do that using a percentage in our HTML here. So if we set this to 62.5%, that's the magic number, then we get to act on the font size of the user. Okay, So let's just remove our font sizes here. So 62.5 is going to equal about 10%. So let's change this to very small, or not 10%, excuse me, 10 pixels by a medium standpoint. All right, so there we go. So we have the very small, and that's going to be 10 pixel or 62.5% of whatever the font size is. I think very small is probably around 10 pixels. Medium is 10 pixels, so that's going to be 10 pixels for there. So now we can use that and we can make it accessible to everyone. So if we have our font size at 2Ms right here, and someone has a very large font size on their screen, then that's going to adjust for that user's settings. But once again, if we just had this set at 10 pixels, then that's not going to adjust no matter what. That will stay static the whole time. So using the percentage there is a really great thing to do. And so this is one of the tips we can use to make our sites much more accessible. And it allows us to, 62.5 is going to equal 10% for us. For those of you that have medium-sized fonts, which I would assume most of you do, so it's going to appear 10 pixels, but then it allows us to build and structure our site to make it so that we can adhere to the user's wishes rather than overriding their choice. We can do this in a lot of ways with percentages. Thankfully, browsers have gotten really good, like I mentioned in the last video, being able to zoom in and zoom out if they want to. So a user, we always go to ESPN.com because they have a pretty great zoom in and zoom out. All right, you can zoom in, zoom out. Of course, government websites tend to be the best at this. White House is one of the good ones, where you see that we actually get the font growing rather than just the whole page growing like that. Really great accessible site. So they're using percentages and rems on their stuff. So there's a lot of techniques we can use. Accessibility in the web is a really big part of our industry. There's people that devote their entire careers to it. I just ask that from now on, for right now, starting now, that every time you build something, you think of somebody else and you become more empathetic to other people's needs as well. A lot of times we develop software and we develop websites and things like that based on our own personal needs and our own personal ideas, and we also need to realize that we are creating software for the world, right? And we need to create software for everyone. So just think about, like, how would somebody that's totally blind use our site? Could they use our site? If they can't, then how do we make it so that they can? And it might take a little bit more work, might take a lot more thinking, but in the long run, it's worth it. So keep that in mind as we're building software, and I'll see you in the next video.